Right? And I come across these videos where some people seem crazy, right? Like they seem like they have schizophrenia and it's legit. The schizophrenia that is.
Right.
And then there's other people that talk about gang stalking and they legitimately do not look like they have any kind of mental issue. They don't sound like they have mental issues. Their situation sounds like one in which that gang stalking would happen. And so, like, what do you think of that? You know, some people are saying stuff like the CIA or forget who it is right now. Let's just talk about like what kind of happens with gang stalking. People will get basically it's gang stalking is when more than one person, so a group of people will stalk one person in a way that they don't show themselves and they try to keep their proofs hidden, but they want to be noticed by the person. Like they'll flatten their tires or like call and hang up with no voice but constantly. They'll like do weird things like throw pebbles at their window, and when they look there's no one ever there, and like just really weird things. What do you think of that? Do you think that's possible? And there's these other scenarios where people are like saying legitimately heavily financed groups, and this is where like the CIA could possibly come in. And I'm not saying it is them or the FBI or whatever. I'm just saying that some people are claiming that they're literally going into their house when they're not there, like changing the seals, the rubber seals in their windows, taking the entire door off of its hinges to get in. Like they have quick access tools to get into people's houses, and they're like setting mini cameras to stalk them in that way. So what would you guys say about something like this?
Definitely. I also agree that gang stalking is something that should be looked into more. I don't have too much factual information on it, and I think that's kind of where, this whole gang stalking concept gets a little gray, is there are people out there saying that it is happening to them. However, there are a lot of people out there, like you said, that have mental illnesses that also say that these things are happening to them. So where does it cross? I have seen on YouTube, different... What are you looking for?
Cigarette.
Oh, I got one for you, man.
Well, what else would I be fumbling around?
Well, it's interesting you actually bring up this whole CIA thing, or possible, because really a lot of this can be seen as conspiracy, but, I mean, it's pretty known, or at least you can find the information that there is operations similar to that. I mean, the same type of agency that'll drug an unknowing civilian to see the effects or to make an influence in a certain direction. That actually happens. I mean,
like, look, what about like Union Jacks and shit? Like, we know that in the past, maybe we don't have any like today's proof, but we absolutely know that like Union Jacks of the past have definitely gang stalked people for nefarious reasons. Gangs do it. That's probably where it gets its name. We know that like mob type organizations do these kind of things to like intimidate and scare. Maybe political factions do these kind of things.
No,
right? What were you going to say, Kelty?
Well, I was going to say that even though I myself may not have an exact example that I can pinpoint down to and say this is exactly, an example of gang stalking, but in today's world of technology, we have, all these applications where we willingly put in our information into. So the concept of gang stalking to me sounds like something that can easily be done, not just by the ABC companies, but anybody that has nefarious want against somebody else. Like, I could be upset at somebody, go online, just simply Google their name, and be able to get, an array of different, personal information that will then allow you to start physically stalking that person.
Right. And if you say you had a group of people that were willing to work together on something like that, I imagine they could definitely get some results.
Well, it's not unrealistic. That's the scary part about all of it, is it's not an unrealistic concept.
No. And if someone, say, didn't know your face and you were like, okay, Johnny, what I need you to do now is go and just stand in front of their work window and stare at them for 10 seconds and walk off. Do it creepy. And then Johnny never shows his face again. Instead, next time, Susan does. So,
So you're talking about like almost paid pawns in a way, where the pawn doesn't realize that they're part of the gang stalking.
Say you have 6 people that all have a similar agenda. You don't need to pay anybody if everybody's working as a team. You and as
yeah, 3 of them could be the ones that show their faces to that person,
and 3 of them could be driving around in cars.
right? And like doing the tire flattening and the breaking in and those kind of things. You see what I'm saying? It's really easy. And if you look at online technology, for instance, like you were kind of alluding to, look at things like camera systems, tracking devices, audio devices that record. Look at things like other kind of devices like Stingray.
Right,
They're a little more expensive, but if you were into that kind of shit, you would totally be willing to buy a Stingray device, which is the device that scrapes data, cell phone data, and you can actually listen in on people's calls, and you can redirect them and stuff like that.
Absolutely. I hate to put it in this light, but Facebook in a way is like the number one corporate gang stalker out there. Yeah,
they're gang stalking like conservatives right now.
Well, just anybody. They track, the application that's downloaded on your phone completely tracks everything via the GPS. You have the camera that's completely activated along with any audio. They can choose to tune in at any time they want without your knowledge that it's even happening.
Well, yeah, and like universities are buying some of these these data points, this datum, and they're using it for
Marketing.
services. Well, yeah, what they'll do is they'll buy it from these companies like Facebook, and then they'll turn around and sell the gleaned information from the data. So they'll buy the information. They'll run statistical analysis on that data. Like, for instance, there was a statistical analysis ran that the public didn't know about, but a private university in California definitely did this work. They bought all the data from cell phone tracking with geographical tracking in San Francisco, and then they interfaced that data with known pedophiles, known drunks, spousal abuse, things like this. And they sold that data so they were able to look at the data, look at the tracking, track the individuals around the city, and find out, okay, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, there's a high likelihood of a big population of pedophiles or wife beaters in the Mission District, so they're going to put signs and phone numbers and stuff for counseling in that area. And then they sell that information to the social service offices, DHS, and all those other companies that actually use that data. Now, that seems like a pretty okay way to use it, but let's talk about like individuals and how, say, one of these welfare workers that happened to buy this data knew that one of those data points was you and followed you and like knew where you were at in the afternoon and knew that where you were, knew your habits, knew your driving route, knew all these things about you. Driving route especially could lead to gang stalking in a serious way, where you could set up things like car accidents and robbery of the person, or even murder of them, like Seth Rich.
It's interesting you actually mentioned that too, because there was a point in my life where I used to live actually in my car for a few months. Like there was a point where I kind of gave everything away. Anyway, I woke up one morning, and this actually happened a few times, where there was a handprint on my back window. Usually you drive around, you get some dust, so I wake up and do my morning routine, and there's a handprint on my back window, and it actually happened a few nights in a row. I'd clean it off, and next morning wake up, and there's a handprint right there.
That's weird. That's crazy.
Oh,
Yeah, I would
Didn't
be
it
like,
also happen to a friend of yours that was sleeping near you in his car?
Yeah, actually. We kind of went on an adventure and kind of.
So, but my point was is that it wasn't just a fluke on your car.
No,
It's that
it was
somebody
both of
messed
us.
with you
Because
and your
sometimes
friend.
sometimes we wouldn't even be like, I'd want to take a week out over into the woods, and I'd actually want to go camp by myself. I'm living in my car, but I can still go camping.
Yeah, totally.
But I'd be gone for a week, and then I'd go back and hang out with him, and he'd talk to me about that. Like, no, it was like he had handprints also, and it wasn't just that. We'd be followed around by other vehicles. Like, you can kind of tell when somebody makes 8 of the same turns that you do, and you're making a circle in a neighborhood. Somebody's following you.
right.
Yeah, I had a really weird situation like that myself. I had a very professional job, and I had to, and it was a white collar kind of job. And every once in a while, it was in the insurance industry, so every once in a while I'd have to go a far distance to meet with a client about one of the insurance policies or something like that. And there was a few times when I had really creepy feelings, and then you kind of start paying attention and realize, wow, that car is, and it might be one car behind you, or there's a car between you,
them, yeah.
but it keeps making the same turns as you, and then so you make erratic decisions to go off script, off course, and this would be a time when I'd have a GPS on my car. My car has its GPS on because I'm going to a specific location, and like, how easy would it be to just hack my GPS and know before I even got where I was going exactly where I was going?
Right.
You know what I mean? And
Because it tells you what your destination is on the GPS.
It also tells you what time you're supposed to arrive. I mean, there's a lot of information that the
interface that GPS
expectations
with any kind of correspondence you've had in that last day, and you know exactly where you're going, who you're meeting with, when you're supposed to be there, everything about it. It's that easy to gang stalk someone in today's society, and so really today's conversation is really not about those people that are crazy and legitimately crazy. Little Timmy has schizophrenia, and so one day he's normal, and the next day he always thinks someone's stalking him, and people think he's crazy for it. Well, I'm not talking about that guy. I'm talking about the guy that's seemingly pretty normal. He has no reason to be followed around, seemingly, and yet he's got these really creepy feelings, and he starts noticing, once he starts looking around, really creepy, weird things like, wow, the seal in my window was never that clean before, or what is this pinhole in my wall, or how come that car keeps following me, or I noticed every day at a certain time this light keeps flicking on out in the woods, or something strange, my dogs keep queuing in that back corner, but there's no animals, like these kind of things.
Yeah, but this all does sound like a little bit crazy to talk about and to actually consider.
Well, that's kind of why we're talking about it here at Kelty Talks.
Right, is because it's something that could possibly...
Because it is kind of crazy.
It is a little bit crazy.
No one else wants to talk about it, so we're going to take on the issue.
Maybe there are other people out there that are watching, this YouTube video right now, and they themselves have had that experience of feeling like they've been stalked by somebody that they just don't know who's stalking them, but there's evidence that something's not right.
And let me remind everybody in the audience tonight that if you look at how many people and I'm not talking people that just work for the government, I'm talking about people that just have security clearances alone. There are 3 million, and that's with an M, people in the United States alone that have security clearances, that
It's
have,
quite a bit.
that's a lot. Okay, and
Right.
now you add on the people that don't, and we're talking 1 in 10, at least, in the United States, is a government worker, whether it's for the state, the county,
That's
or
insane.
the federal government.
Wow.
Okay, that is a lot of heads.
That is.
And if you look at what was happening in Obama's era, he made these programs for kids that were like kind of Nazi programs almost, where the kids were like, they were singing songs of Obama being the, almost North
Yeah,
Korea like.
that was really
Do you guys
strange.
remember that?
That was the first time I'd ever seen where it's like people were making songs about
But
our president.
what I'm saying
What?
is, like, he made entire groups of youth that would run around doing his thing, right? And then there were like other programs that were made for businesses where there were snitch programs, basically, where the head of the company would be approached by a Fed and say, hey, you will talk to us, and you're
Right.
going to keep it quiet, and you're going to give us any bit of information we want, and we're going to let you be a good boy for that. And that's just what it works like. I mean, you can go on YouTube and see some of these programs, and even news outlets talking about them. They're real. I'm not like bullshitting you here. Like, these are real programs of hear something, say something, or see
Right.
something, say something.
Yeah.
And these really lead to situations where you get gang stalked.
Right, because now all of a sudden it's kind of like, CPS, for instance. Somebody
Ooh,
just has to
800,000 missing kids.
turn
Ooh.
around and say, oh, this child seems to be in despair, and then that just opens up an investigation where CPS now has to go and find out and interview, is this child in despair? Meanwhile, they take the child during this process to make sure everything's good and clear.
Yeah, the king steals your child. Isn't that crazy? Hey, you remember back in the days of Rome? I don't know if you do because you weren't there, but history says that when the Romans went into the northern lands where the Germanic people, tribes were up there, part of the way that they conquered those people was to take one of their kids and bring them back to the Roman province and raise them there.
It wasn't just take one of their kids. Preferably, they'd like to actually take their, like the more royal, like say the head of a tribe. Like they would take his son because that would be one, next in line for their rule, and two, the amount of power that child when he grows up will eventually have.
But what I'm saying is that because they take your child, they have you by the balls. So it's the same concept. Okay, whether they're taking it from a poor person or they're taking it from an elite, they have you from now on.
Right, because a parent would do anything for their child.
Right. And
It
so no
literally-
matter what, the state owns you like a bitch, like a slave.
Well, that's crazy. But, gang stalking is something that should be really looked into. I mean, let's talk about it from a non-ABC government involvement angle here. And let's talk about it from a personal angle. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who do have mental health issues, and say you just piss off the wrong person. Say you made that one CEO that just happens to be a sociopath at the same time. They have access to absolutely everything.
And $1 million bonus.
And $1 million bonus on top of it, so they could just blow all the resources they want. And how easy is it to go online to like Amazon or eBay and buy these screw-in light fixtures that look like a light bulb, or the fixtures that look like a plug outlet, but really the screw in the center is a camera.
Yeah, they're
or,
readily available for cheap.
They're really.
And they have great
And they sell
resolution.
them under surveillance, and and I've only seen these things because I've looked for surveillance stuff for myself as well, just to keep my own homestead secure. But even then, you do have to look into some of those things, because a surveillance camera that's hooked up directly into your own TV is one thing. You're monitoring that at all times. But these surveillance cameras nowadays are hooked up to a wireless IP system that anybody can get into. Like, I can set my phone up into a camera, like just an old phone, and download an application on it that just generates an IP address. And as long as I have that IP address, or I know what that IP address is, anyone else who also has that IP address can log right into that camera at any time, and no one's notified. It's not like the camera ever pops up a notification that says, hey, the thing's been logged into. It's just, that's what it is. You have full access to whatever's streaming.
Yeah, which is just another resource that can be used.
Right.
especially when we're talking about ABC companies that know how to do that shit easy.
Well, as you were saying, it's not just ABC companies; it's also private individuals. I mean,
Well, yeah, think about this. It just came out. I read an article today how the groups that Facebook hired to do the monitoring, so to filter what's good and what's bad, how Mark Zuckerberg just told Congress that we won't go after conservatives, and I got 24,000 employees that are dedicated strictly for filtering and all this. Well, he actually hired a private company, and then if you look into the private company who owns it, it's George fucking Soros.
Really?
surprise,
Yeah.
surprise.
The
Surprise.
same motherfucking talking heads. Like, at what point do we just take them off their podium? At what point do we just say, okay,
You've
this
had
is
enough. Right.
enough is enough. It's kind of like your kid, you know. You can see that they're getting tired. You love your child. You don't want to mess with them. You kind of let them go and let them exhaust themselves. And at some point, you just realize this kid's gonna not stop.
So you just put them to bed.
So you just
it's
say,
bedtime.
okay, it's time to go to bed, and you
Right.
take them to bed.
Yeah.
At what point do we, as the people, just gather up our cigarette butts and throw them in their face? Do we just gather up our manure and dump it on the steps of the courthouse? At what point do we just put gum in the eye of the camera and liquid in the speaker and just stop it?
Right.
And just fucking stop it.
When the food trucks stop moving, I mean, nobody's gonna do anything when they're still being fed. I mean, people, if you look at them, especially in mass, look at LA. As long as they're fat and happy, nobody's gonna rebel. Nobody's gonna riot. I mean, any animal is that way.
So you think we possibly even accept the concept of gang stalking as long as it doesn't, impede in our own personal lives too much?
We're okay with
I
some
think the
people
majority
being
of people
gang
will,
stalked because
but-
we figure as a whole that the only people that would get gang stalked are people that were bad.
Oh, I don't get my personal beliefs wrong. It's just
Like, we're willing to accept it. Like the Romans were willing to accept the baby raping in the brothels, and we know this thousands of years later because we've found hundreds and hundreds of baby bodies under these brothels.
Right.
So, and
But I don't think that everybody that gets gang stalked or says that they're being gang stalked are bad or nefarious people. I think that's where the cognitive dissonance comes into play, is because a lot of these people just, they really don't have much going on in their lives. They're not doing nefarious things, but yet
they have
they're
no backup. They have no serious group of friends that can help them.
Right.
Be
They are
protected.
usually people that are singled out. They don't have family around. Maybe they live, off somewhere, or never had family to begin with, or separated from their families. Very limited friends, But these are also the same people that would be susceptible to, like, MK Ultra or, other
Project Paperclip.
Project Paperclip. Right. I mean, these are easily targeted individuals at that point that are
So
targeted
basically,
population.
it's like the perfect cover. And I think that what we're all what the proofs are alluding to is that this is absolutely possible, and it probably, most likely, does actually happen, and there's more than likely very, very little chance that you're going to stop it on a whole.
But who's going to listen to those people?
That's what I mean. So there'll be no recourse.
Right.
If you could literally get away with gang stalking a person, you'll never get caught. No one will ever say something. And usually that singled out person is so fucking scared that they'll never say nothing.
Right, because they don't feel like they have a backing or somebody that could possibly believe their story is real.
Right.
Yeah. Even if they've given their story before, most people have probably either rolled their eyes or turned their head to deaf ears, where they're just like not interested any longer because, that's not something that maybe they've experienced, so they can't relate to it, or B, they're immediately like, oh wow, like that can't happen. Like they almost dismiss it completely.
You must be
like
crazy.
that's
or
you must
really
be crazy.
stressed or tired or something.
There's something else happening here. Like the actual what they're telling them has happened, they completely dismiss. It's like
Well,
that's
and
not
there's the
possible.
learned complacency aspect too. When you see that it is an overwhelming task or a daunting thing to do, like try to figure out who's gang stalking you, good fucking luck with that one. Like they just run off into the darkness, and you know they're there, but you'll never.
No,
you know.
and well, the
So
most
like it makes other people that you tell, like say I was being gang stalked and I was like, yo, excuse me everybody, I'm burping over my drink.
yeah.
Say I was like, Uhtred, I'm being gang stalked. You'd be like, whoa, okay,
Are you
I need
sure?
help. And you'd be like, in
How
your
am I
mind, you're
even
like,
supposed to
I
help you?
totally do not want to be endeavoring into this.
I don't want to be gang stalked next now either. Like, immediately that's what I would think. Like, if I try to help you get out of the gang
Yeah, you
stalking,
want me
that
to
puts
put my
me
face out there?
in a potential position to be
Rather
gang stalked.
following me around?
Well, that fear will also, like, it dissuades anybody from actually building that type of friendship. I mean, if you had a good group of friends before you were ever gang stalked, then you would have a more likely chance of, convincing your friends to help you,
Yeah.
like, secure your own sanity, really.
So the more alone you are, the more accessible you are, the more no one would ever find out.
Right.
So gang stalking someone that really had no friends or family, it's just like almost like you could do it.
Right, and then when you have things like Facebook, where we can easily tell if you have a lot of followers or not, we can easily tell if you have friends that you're with all the time. You know, we're able to identify through self-reporting if you're a perfect target or not to be gang stalked.
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
that's so
They got
sad.
a little too many friends. We'll never get this guy.
Right, because they
Let's
can
move
be
on to
accounted for.
The other guy. Yeah, exactly. So
Well,
it seems like a pretty.
Even if in your social media you say you have 100 friends, do you really know half of them?
Well, that's what
Right.
Yeah.
that's what Kelty was kind of getting at, is that through your Facebook self-reporting, you'll post where you're at, you'll post who you're with, you'll post what your
I've
mood
even
is.
seen people post their
So you'll
food.
know if they're alone.
They'll go to a restaurant,
Right.
take a picture, and
But some
post
of
it.
these things are needed too for that baseline of normality. Not online. I mean, online is when you're giving potential targets, people that are targeting others, like a whole storyline of what your normality is. But, like, for instance, when I travel somewhere, I make it a point to let someone within my home location know,
Hey, this
Hey,
is where I'm going.
this is where I'm going, this is where I'm expected to be,
how long.
this
and
is
all
how
that,
long.
yeah.
That way, if something is outside of that norm, that should be a red flag, and they should probably go and look for me at that point.
Right. Right.
Just a side note, I think it's kind of actually funny, and I hope the viewers actually make the comparison too. This is like a campfire ghost story, but it's actually real. Like, you hear those stories of like, oh, 3 campers, sitting next to a campfire, blah blah blah. Like, there's a ghost story that happens to try to, like, but I mean, think about, there really were in the middle of nowhere almost, just a few of us that's
Talking about gang stalking.
talking about being stalked.
Nice.
If you were
And
actually
it's very dark out on the other side of this fire.
you can't see anything on the other side of the fire.
Yeah, you can hear the creek. We can, anyways.
But-
And
Near the creek,
but
I can hear
can't
some
see it.
wildlife, out
If-
there.
If you're this far into the video and you're still with us, by all means, leave a comment below down in the comment section. Let us know if this is something you can relate to, if this is something that you've experienced. We may make another video regarding this if this is something that others are also experiencing or want to hear more about.
Yeah, we may get into more of the nitty gritty on gang stalking, like how they would actually go about doing things like this, what kind of people or what kind of mentality of people would do this, and things like that. So, Kelty Talks.
Kelty Talks.
Kel-